Hi, and welcome to CMO Journeys. I'm Christian Badak, and on this show, I talk with the marketing leaders behind some of today's most interesting brands. We get into their career paths, how they think about marketing, and how they work with agencies. Placer.ai helps brands, retailers, real estate players, and investors understand what's happening in the physical world through location analytics, providing a meaningful lens on retail, commerce, media, and changing consumer behavior. Ethan Chernofsky is the company's CMO, sitting at the intersection of data, storytelling, and the future of physical retail. He'll also be speaking at Possible in Miami this year on how shifting consumer behavior is reshaping that landscape. Ethan, welcome to CMO Journeys.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit. This is CMO Journeys. We'd love to hear a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What kind of kid were you when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I mean, I was pretty, down the middle, like a kid growing up in Pennsylvania. Like I played baseball. I did well in school because my parents made me do well in school. and yeah, kind of like I think I've always been, really interested in people dynamics. So I did my master's at the London School of Economics in decision-making theories. And so I've always been really fascinated in what are the factors that drive decisions for people, and how do we leverage that understanding to create these wider trends and understandings of what we can do to better influence positive behaviors and avoid negative behaviors.
Interesting. So you went to school here in the U.S. Now you're not living in the U.S. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up over there.
Yeah, so I mean, when I moved out when I was 18, and like I left, and then have spent some time in other global environments, and I just there's a really thriving high tech ecosystem in Tel Aviv that's kind of, once you get into it, it's pretty interesting to get kind of continuously sucked into new opportunities and exciting, innovative companies. And that's kind of been the story of my career. So really operating heavily in that tech sector. I started agency, so I worked in kind of public relations with like a lot of really exciting companies like Wix and Lightrix and Lemonade, and then got the desire to go beyond that. So agency is amazing, and then you get to have all these really interesting touches, especially on the PR side. I think what I was always missing was the sense of ownership, of full ownership, like not having multiple accounts, not just one focus, the ability to dive in, handle all the details. And I think it was really like I got very lucky in terms of how marketing, especially in the tech ecosystem, has evolved, where I think there were waves where programmatic was the thing. And if you were not a programmatic oriented marketer, there wasn't really a place for you. And I think when it became clear that that process doesn't actually work, and that's not where the future is going, it's not this kind of developer oriented marketing, it's kind of classic storytelling, brand building, etc. I think that's when I started getting my opportunities, and it was an exciting moment to be a part of.
Yeah. So you mentioned you came in like through marketing communications, PR, and strategy, rather than maybe like a classic brand manager, route. When did you really realize, though, that storytelling and market narrative could become a real, operating advantage for you?
I mean, the gift of I think agency broadly, but my PR experience specifically, was you get to work with dozens and dozens of companies very closely. And because it's kind of the narrative, the storytelling, you're working at a very senior level. So you're working with the CMOs and VPs of marketing and CEOs, et cetera. And so you get to see what works across the board. What are the common themes? And again, obviously there's differences whether you're B2B or B2C or, whatever it may be. But there are a lot of commonalities even then of what sets great marketing apart, what establishes the companies that really succeed versus those that, they can do something, but they aren't able to kind of scale in the same way. And one of the big elements to recognize, at least for me, was how in some ways PR, storytelling, brand building, messaging was very, very highly valued, but also at the same time, very undervalued. And so there was this unique place where if you could and focus on the ability to make that piece of the puzzle tangible. So tie brand into lead generation, tie brand into these very clear outputs that a business needs to hit. There was a tremendous upside to change the way we viewed that perspective. And I think when you can do that early stage, so when you're building a company and you start off with a foundation of storytelling and brand building, it enables you to do things that a company is going to struggle with if it's just like, hey, we kind of paid ads our way to our first X amount of revenue, and now we need to figure out what our story is. That's much harder than saying, hey, we're going to start like this, and then we're going to figure out what are the ways that we leverage all these channels, paid channels, etc., but with the starting point of how do we tell stories, how do we express ourselves, what's our kind of perspective on the world from a brand perspective.
Mm-hmm. Was there a certain client maybe that you worked on that really impacted and kind of shaped that vision that you have now and that philosophy?
I mean, there was a few. There was like Wix was a really great example. I think they have still today, one of the most brilliant CMOs, and just taking action and understanding how to measure each action, what they're expecting from each action, and how do you give things their proper place without. I think there's a tendency sometimes to be data driven in the wrong directions. So you look at a channel that, I don't know, like your demo request, you're like, oh my God, this costs $0, therefore it's the best channel we have. It's like, well, no, it's a proxy of all these other things that you're doing really well. And so learned a ton from them. I think, Lightrix is another brilliant example. Apps like Facetune, the confidence that they went to market, their focus on like efficiency and what their real story is, what they are trying to do. There's, obviously there's so many companies. I think you learn something from all of them, but I think those are two that certainly inspired me a lot.
Yeah. So you made a few different pivots, in your career. Was there a certain moment in that career so far that you took a leap before maybe you felt you were fully ready?
Yeah, I mean, the leap from agency to in-house was scary. I mean, like, agency, there's a certain degree of expectation and there's a certain failure tolerance too. So like you don't, especially in the PR world, you're not expecting your customers to last with you for decades. Like there is an assumption of like, there's going to be some degree of turnover. You're going to work on new things. And it was like, okay, I know I can do this piece, but can you dive into the details? Can you kind of take on some of these other challenges? And it was certainly something that I was very, frankly, very scared of. I think there's also, I happened to I had the opportunity to work in an agency where I was one of the earliest employees. You got to build it. And that was something that I certainly enjoy and if not prefer in terms of what I'm looking for. And then I had to go to a larger company where they already had processes in place. Like I went to a company called SimilarWeb after my agency experience. It was a brilliant, amazing company. And they were doing so many things so well that it's like in certain places, you're like, you want to do things, but you also need to kind of learn how to shut up and like learn from these brilliant people who have already done something so successfully. So it's this, you're learning to take on a new role. You're learning to operate within a new environment. And I think with any of those changes, there's a very healthy degree of fear, but I think that's probably a good sign that you're doing something that's interesting.
Yeah. At what point does that fear subside, or did it subside for you?
I mean, never, because if the fear subsides too much, I think you're probably not challenging yourself. There should always be this healthy balance of like, the area that you do well and the area that you're kind of working your way into, that there has to be a healthy balance. And I think that's not just in terms of channels or different tactics, but you always need to be trying things that scare you a little bit. And I think I would also say, it's a good signal. Like it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone I'm very close with, also a marketer, who was talking about the imposter syndrome and like the challenges of dealing with it. And I said, for me, I don't think it's a syndrome. I think it's real. Like I don't have imposter syndrome because I feel like an imposter. I have it because I am an imposter. Every new space you've gone into is something you haven't earned the right to be doing, but that's part of the process. And I think the most interesting things happen when you have a healthy foot in that area of new and challenging and different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I feel the same way. Someone said something to me the other day about getting comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And I think that's another way to kind of put what you just said.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. So, that's a great piece of advice in and of itself. I'm curious, like, if you've maybe had a mentor or an investor, a book, or a parent or something that, gave you some piece of advice that really influences how you're making decisions here today.
So it's interesting. Like I've had so many of them, and I think there's there's a few elements here. It's like, obviously there's people that you're closer with that are like my parents obviously have a much bigger stake in my success. But I think the things I expect from them and certain people in your life are very different from what I expect from other types of mentors or people I learn from. I'm really dug into the idea that you should be learning from everybody, good and bad, right? And there are some of the people that I have been closest with in my career, I've learned a tremendous amount from, and I'm so grateful for their guidance and support. But there's also a lot of people who I did not get along with well. We did not vibe in a great way. And I learned a ton from them too, both in negative things about myself, things that I don't want to replicate about them, things that I really admire about them. And so I think it's this, if you're honest, and it's interesting because I think in marketing, this is an especially big problem. There is this idea of the full stack marketer, right? And I could not say this more strongly or with a greater degree of confidence. The concept is stupid. There is no such thing. Or if there are, they are unicorns, right? Most of us are really good at something, okay at a piece, and not good at something. And the second you're open to that, and that's as professionals, that's as executives, that's as leaders, that's as people who do the work themselves. So you're constantly learning, and I think the willingness to, which is difficult in the moment sometimes, to look at someone where you're like, oh, this isn't my favorite person, but they do this thing awesome. Like I should probably take some cues from that. I think has been, it's not fun, but it's so important.
Sure. So what are you really good at?
I think we tend to be good at the things that we fall in love with, and maybe we fall in love with the things that we tend to be good at. I think I have skills that are like, I don't think I'm a better storyteller. Like I meet storytellers all the time. I'm like, oh my God, this person's so much better than I am. And I meet strategists that are much better than I am. And I meet people who are much better with data. And I think one of the things that has helped me is I think I'm pretty good at a lot of those things. And that combination is something I want to I try to lean into. I also feel like one of the things that I'm very comfortable with being fascinated by things. And I'm very comfortable with being in areas that are not comfortable, right? So that gives you the ability, I think, when you're able to kind of lean into your fascinations, you can unlock your charisma and excitement and energy. And if I have learned anything, it's that people, we do tons of data storytelling on industries. And we did this, when I got to Placer, I had very little background in retail. I'd worked a year and a half at SimilarWeb, doing a lot on retail, but other things as well. And we were like kind of commenting on this industry where you would have been very reasonable to say, who the hell cares what you think? Now, we had an approach to this, but the willingness to kind of put yourself out there and put yourself out there with like, not negativity, not pessimism, but just energy and enthusiasm and excitement. Like, I am fascinated by this. This is what I think, right? I think it was really interesting to see how positively that was met. So people from the industry are willing to give you a second chance, a third chance, the ability to like have some ideas that are wrong. If you come at it with the right approach of, I don't have all the answers, I'm positing a hypothesis, I'm not telling you how things are. So I think those were really beneficial. And I was very, I feel they have had a huge impact on my progression in my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about Placer. You mentioned some of the work, some of the focus that you're kind of exploring. What's taking your attention right now?
So, I guess there's two pieces to this, because I think on the one side, our marketing is, the starting point was, we're a data company. If I just tell you that data is important, nobody's going to be like, oh my God, really? And so our whole thinking was, we need to show people how to get from a data point to a conclusion. And so we can do case studies, we did, but if we give our opinion, we're essentially going from, here are numbers, this is how we interpret those numbers, and this is the conclusion we come to as a result. Someone can look at the content and say, hey, I think that conclusion is terrible. I think you are the worst, but I would have gone in this direction. And that's amazing. It's just the ability of showing people how to put two and two together, and then let them run with it, because they're going to provide their own expertise, their own insights, leverage their own experience. So there's a side where we get to just grapple with the data on a regular basis. So I think there's a part of me that's really fascinated by certain things that we're seeing in the numbers, in the trends, in the way retail is changing and expanding. And there's also the side of like, I'm a CMO at a company and trying to figure out how is the role of marketing changing? We're obviously, this is going to shock you. AI has a big role to play in how marketing is going to develop. And I think we have to take a very serious approach to constantly poking at it to sharpen a long-term vision that is informed by what exists today, but still has this perception of what might exist tomorrow. And that means that, like, I think some of the quick short-term conclusions that were like, think about the conversations around AI marketing. I think initially the feeling was, tons of content. Everyone's got tons of content. I'm like, yeah, but if everyone have tons of content, you just have more crappy vanilla content that makes interesting content all the more important. It makes content less valuable. It makes every asset less valuable. So then therefore, what's your approach then? And I think there's other things where, like, I look at, the ability to, like, I'm a big fan of using Claude. Like, the things that I can do today to engage with design teams, to engage with data teams, to engage with product teams is far beyond what I would have been capable of doing 4 years ago. And so it's, in some ways, it takes areas where we're not good at, and it allows us to be okay, which is a massive jump. And when we use properly, it allows us to gain efficiencies in the things we're good at, but not by replacing the things that make us special, by augmenting the things that make us special.
Sure. What are you finding some of the capabilities you're increasingly spending on?
On the AI side?
In general, it could be AI, it could be anything.
Yeah, we're definitely putting a big focus on, I think right now we're in a phase where we're asking really intense questions of what can we bring better ongoing visibility to that was a challenge to do before? What can we automate that we couldn't automate before, so that we can free up really smart, creative people to be doing less manual, kind of tedious tasks and more creativity? And I think we're really oriented towards how do we take the next step? Because again, from our perspective, is we want content, we want ideas out there that kind of show what the data could do. And I think now we're kind of in this place of, okay, what tools can we build on top of it? How can we be a more product-y minded marketing group? And I don't mean that by product marketing, I mean specifically like actually building, creating things that would in the past have been beyond our capabilities. So those are areas that I think we're really interested in now. Obviously, every kind of 6 months, there's things that I think are more important and less important depending on how the capabilities evolve and which things we try and succeed or fail with. But I'd say those are areas that are really catching my attention right now.
Yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, you're speaking at Possible. I'll be down at Possible as well. And your session, from what I understand, is about evolving consumer behaviors, are redefining retail and commerce.
Yeah.
So when you think about that topic, what do you believe most people in the industry still don't fully understand yet?
I think it's still happening, but there's a greater recognition that, we had this, we need context for this. So in 2019, the dominant narrative in the world of retail was the retail apocalypse. Stores are dying, e-commerce is going to grow and continue growing forever, and eventually we're just not going to have physical spaces, we'll have it for other things, whatever. That's been fundamentally debunked. Again, who knows what's going to happen 60 years from now, but I think in the short term, we know that that's not the case. Like, e-commerce rates have slowed down, physical stores are more important. And I think that kind of first shock to the system was like, oh my gosh, that comes with many other shocks. And so and I think the amazing thing about looking at kind of location data and other sources is you can see the trends that are really sticking and you can see the things that are short term. And when you're able to kind of isolate those out, you can make a pretty strong prediction of what the world of retail is going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And it's necessary to do that because a lot of the, think about something like in the advertising world, like retail media and physical environments, like the infrastructure, the plumbing, the time it takes to get there can be 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if you see some of the things and you feel a degree of conviction around that, you're like, we should be making this investment because this is clearly what's going to happen. And obviously some people in 5 years from now are going to be like, oh my God, what geniuses. And some people are going to Monday morning quarterback this and talk about who missed. But I think you can see so much today that is telling us where retail is heading, and that has an enormous impact on the way we're going to advertise, on the way we're going to shop, on the way we're going to market. And I think what we're trying to do in this session specifically is talk through those trends that we're seeing right now, what they mean if taken to their logical conclusions, and how that is going to change the way retail operates in the very near term.
Sure. When you're preparing for this type of conference, I'm curious, are you mostly trying to educate the market, challenge assumptions, or maybe learn where buyers are still confused? How do you approach this?
I mean, for us, it's we try to you get to sit in this interesting point where you have a data source, you have customers and prospects and like kind of your friends from the industry, and all of these inputs, and you're looking for where don't these things line up? Where is the data telling us a story that people in the industry might be saying something very different? I'll give you an example. We were asked on a podcast once for a controversial opinion, and this popped up, but we dug into it more, and it's become even a deeper feeling. And the feeling was that convenience is the most overrated thing in retail. And I think when we look at the data, we see that consumers are visiting more locations as part of their kind of journey within any category than they were in the last 10 years ago. They're driving farther away to get to certain retailers than they were in the past. They're spending less time at each retailer, right? These are all fundamentally inconvenient things. Like if I was emphasizing convenience, I'd go to one place and do as much as I can there and, stay as close to home as possible. I'd do as much as e-commerce as possible. Customers aren't doing that. And it's because they value things more than convenience. And so therefore, convenience is this binary bar where I don't know, a store that I think is okay, but it's down the street. They're good enough for getting milk and cheese. But the store that I really love, they're good enough to farm up because they have this, product X and Y that I'm absolutely in love with.
Sure.
And so I think we are looking to try and understand what are the things that we're seeing pop from the data, especially when they're counter to the narrative, and try to express them, make the case why this is so important. And I think one of two things is going to happen for that audience. Either they're going to be like, oh my gosh, we agree, this is interesting. Or on the flip side, they're going to say, fundamentally disagree. And I feel even more strongly about this point, because here's why. And both of those things are great because they're helping us say, this is how data challenges, confirms, sharpens our perspectives on things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was not aware of that with retail. That's interesting. So definitely going to look forward to your talk there. So you guys do sit at an interesting position where agencies they could be customers of yours, right? They can also be a channel into some of the enterprise accounts that you want to work with. How do you think about agencies strategically as buyers, as partners, as route to the market, and how has that evolved as Pacer has actually grown?
So I think the interesting thing about Placer and our data is that every time we find a use case, there is a use case on the other side. And so it's this data is a language, right? We speak the language of data. And so if there is someone using this data, there's someone that they're communicating to with the data. So in the advertising side, it could be an agency trying to put together a really good pitch and explain why for a large retailer, their strategy is to be very different in the Northwest than it will be in the Southeast. And actually, in the Southeast, they're going to break it down even further because Alabama and Mississippi are very different than Florida and Georgia. And here's their thought process on which brands they want to partner with and who the ideal kind of influencers to work with are and why. And then the retailer is going to look at that data and kind of understand it from their lens of like, oh, is this what we're seeing? Is this what's lining up with our perspective? Are we seeing different products move as a result? Does this change the way we think about it? And I think the exchange of ideas is really powerful for us, where we see agencies using it, we see their customers using it, we see their customers using it across different parts of the organization. And I think again, it's this really grateful to be working in a product like this dynamic where it doesn't just solve one problem or a small narrow set of problems. It helps solve a fairly wide array of problems. And the really interesting thing is that on nearly a monthly basis, you're identifying something new you can do with it.
Yeah, very interesting. So you mentioned your marketing organization. How are you building it, number one, and how do you decide what capabilities you want to keep internal versus maybe bringing in an outside partner or an agency?
Yeah, I think when we consider the question of, do we want to partner with someone external? We ask, I think, a few questions. I personally sit on the side that I like things internal, right? But there are clearly reasons why an external resource is better. I think in certain cases there is a value that comes from the wider exposure. So you're balancing between, if I have someone in-house and they just get to live and breathe this every day, there's a benefit to that. But what you lose is the constant touch points and all the different sectors and all the things that an agency will gain. And so you're looking at that balance. You're also looking at the number of people. So one internal person versus a team at an agency. Yes, that team at an agency isn't 24/7 thinking about your brand, but it's a group of people. So you get all these different. So I think you're asking for every specific potential use case. Where does that value sit? And is there enough to gain? I think you're probably also starting from the area of, are we doing this well, or is this an area that's a priority for us? So there's certain things that you're testing. And so you're probably not going to do with an agency just because it's going to add an expense. You're just trying to get a sense of it. There's certain channels that you are really good at, and you are like, we own this, we're going to do this, this is what our internal skill set hits. And there's that balance. It's like, one, you know that is important, but you don't have the skills internally for, and that's where I think the agency fits the bill perfectly.
Yeah. Speaking specifically of Placer, where are you thinking about, or where are you currently working with partners versus internal?
I think, PR is a great example. We have an external agency that we've been working with for 7 years now, and I think is a great example of the benefits of that an agency brings to the process of the middleman that can kind of serve multiple interests, have their finger on the pulse of a wider industry that we're trying to operate within. But at the same time, we have a unique way of approaching the markets. We wanted someone we didn't want a huge agency. We wanted something smaller. And I think in every one of these cases, and this is, I've seen this in the places where I've worked and kind of colleagues who have done this, is I think sometimes there's this tendency to say, okay, who did good work with other businesses? And I want to work with them, as opposed to whose model and approach is the best aligned with what I need for that specific channel. Because I think that's how you uncover, again, some of these smaller boutique agencies are perfect for some brands, and some of the huge agencies are massively amazing for others. And it's not always because I'm big, therefore I need to work with big. It's their skill sets, the benefits they have of their model align with the things I want to achieve.
Yeah. So how does an agency or a partner, reach out to someone like yourself or someone on your team? What cuts through for you versus just being ignored?
I mean, we ignore a lot. We try to be polite about it. Like we have salespeople too, and so you try to take that and keep that in mind. I think the things that stand out are, you didn't personalize because you said, "Hey, Ethan, I see you've been at Placer. You're at Placer." It's like, okay, that's not personalization. That's nonsense. So real personalization does stand out. Being multi-channel stands out. Like if you have a good message, having a good message, I think is the most important thing. And I think also taking advantage of the opportunities that come from face-to-face. So, there is a partner we work with for like our events. And the guy stopped by at an event we did a couple of years ago. And we had a weird conversation about protein bars. And the next day he stopped by with the protein bar. And he was like, look, if you're ever looking for something different, I'd love to be in touch. That was a trigger where, like, in a year or two later, we were like, hey, we're ready to make a move. They were one of the people we called. We were really blown away with them. We've been working together really successfully for over a year now. So I think it's marketing, right? Channels give you different things. So just if you go up to a booth at an event, that doesn't mean that your person's going to sign right away. But you can create a moment that makes you memorable. So when they're ready to make that decision, they're thinking of you. And I think the biggest thing is have a smart, effective message. If it's generic fluff and you're spraying and praying, at least for me, like, it's not going to resonate.
Yeah. No, I love what you said too. And what I think I have to reset expectations a lot of times with agencies about the timeline. When it's one thing, when a lot of agencies are used to getting something inbound, an inbound RFP, there's obviously an immediate need. But when you're doing something more proactively, you're trying to build a relationship, it takes time. This example you gave, someone you met, you were impressed by, but it was a year or more before it actually came to life. And I think a lot of agencies don't understand the investment of time that it takes for these deals to kind of move through.
And then not getting, like, I did agency business development. Like, I did that for a long time. And there are customers that we ended up working with, having very successful relationships, that it was, you have a meeting, you pitch, you think you pitch well, you lose. You go again another year, you go again, the staying positive, staying focused, not getting, having a long, I think one of the biggest challenges, when I think about myself in the beginning of my career versus today, a no is temporary. You're going to get another shot at this if you handled your business properly, if you were prepared, if you prepped for that pitch, if it was well set up, you're going to get more shots. And so, and relationship development and being impressive and being kind and positive, these are really valuable things that are going to give you, you're just looking to increase the likelihood of success. You can't guarantee you're going to win every pitch. But if you give yourself a 55% chance as opposed to a 45% chance, your likelihood of winning is a lot bigger.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. And I like to turn this back down to possible. I think these, in real life events, like possible, offer, those opportunities to stand out versus it's so noisy now digitally. The opportunity to stop by a booth or shake somebody's hand or say hello after, their speech or something is really powerful. I think almost more so now than it's been in so long. So, yeah, this has been great. I want to kind of wrap this up here. You will be in Miami for Possible, and I'm curious, what does a non-conference moment look like for you when you're down in Miami?
All right, so this is it. My wife's from Hollywood, so just up the road, and I grew up a diehard Dolphins fan. So a perfect Miami moment for me is me and my 10-year-old going to a game, hopefully winning, but we're Dolphins fans, so that's certainly not a guarantee, and enjoying the kind of that wider Miami atmosphere. So there's definitely something that is peak Miami for me.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Well, Ethan, thank you so much for this conversation, the insights that you shared. To everybody watching or listening, don't forget to follow CMO Journeys for more conversations with the marketing leaders that are shaping what's next. I'm Christian Madak. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.